The color drained from Darla Penrose's face the moment I pressed play. In the middle of the packed HOA meeting, the footage began to roll on the projector screen. The image was crystal clear, broadcast for everyone to see. It was her, there. HOA President, on a ladder at 2 a.m., methodically tearing my security cameras from the walls of my house. A profound silence descended upon the room as 32 homeowners watched their leader commit what our lawyer would later define as felony destruction of property and criminal trespassing. To understand how we reached this point, we must go back 3 weeks. My name is Jonathan Pierce, and I had just become a resident of Rosewood Heights, a quiet suburban community with pristine lawns and an HOA I assumed would be a minor formality. My profession is cybersecurity consulting, a role that necessitates a home office filled with expensive equipment and thus a valid reason for installing a comprehensive security system. 1 week after the installation was complete, the first official letter from the HOA arrived. It declared my cameras in violation of the architectural guidelines due to their visibility from the street. I responded with a polite and reasonable email, explaining their security function and offering a compromise. I would paint the camera housings to match the house's trim. The following day, HOA President Darla Penrose appeared at my door. She was the perfect archetype, wearing a blazer in 90-degree weather, armed with a clipboard, and wearing a smile that held no warmth. In a voice that was artificially sweet, she informed me that the cameras had to be removed within 72 hours. Failure to comply would result in daily fines of $200. I informed her that I would be reviewing the HOA bylaws myself. This is where the situation escalated. I dedicated that evening to a thorough examination of every page of our HOA documents. There was no mention of security cameras. The bylaws specified rules for satellite dishes and solar panels, but a policy on security equipment was non-existent. I presented this finding to Darla in an email, citing the exact sections. Her response was swift. The cameras, she claimed, fell under a general architectural modifications clause and required board approval. I submitted an application for approval that same night, adhering to every single procedural requirement. The rejection came back in less than 24 hours. This rapid turnaround was the first major red flag, as the bylaws explicitly granted the board a 30-day review period. The stated reason for rejection was a potential invasion of neighbors' privacy. I resubmitted, clarifying that the camera's field of view was limited to my property and the public street. Rejected again, this time for aesthetic reasons. I submitted a third time, including photos demonstrating how discreet the cameras were. The final rejection cited a risk of lowering property values. At this point, it was clear that Darla had made this a personal conflict. Whether it was because I had dared to challenge her with the bylaws, or because she disliked a new resident who failed to immediately submit to her authority, the outcome was the same. I decided it was time to play strategically. I installed a new, hidden camera inside my doorbell fixture, making it completely invisible and exempt from any architectural guidelines. I also configured my system to back up all security footage to the cloud hourly, a decision that would soon prove invaluable. I began a process of obsessive documentation. Every email, every hostile glare, every time she paused in front of my house. My neighbor, an elderly man named Frank, confirmed my suspicions. He warned me that Darla had been asking other residents for complaints against me, attempting to build a case to force my removal from the neighborhood. He recounted how she had done this to 3 other homeowners who challenged her. 2 had moved, and 1 had given up after incurring thousands in legal fees. He advised caution, noting her husband was a retired police officer and she often boasted of her connections. The fines began, despite the fact my applications were still technically within the 30-day review period. $200 per day. I continued to pay them while documenting everything, knowing a full reimbursement was inevitable. Darla escalated her campaign of harassment. She would walk by my house multiple times a day to photograph my cameras, sometimes with other board members in tow to point and disapprove. She would stand at my property line for extended periods, simply staring. She then initiated a smear campaign. I learned from Frank that she was telling people I was a criminal, perhaps a drug dealer, since I needed so many cameras. She even suggested to several neighbors that they should keep their children away. This was a classic Darla tactic, using fear and gossip as weapons when official channels were not producing results fast enough. Then came the night everything changed. At approximately 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, my motion alerts triggered. By the time I checked my phone, the cameras were already offline. Outside, I discovered all 4 visible cameras had been ripped from their mountings and stolen, leaving significant damage to my siding. I immediately called 911. The responding officer was professional but skeptical of my theory about the HOA president. That skepticism vanished when I presented the demand letters and email chains. He took my report, and in the meantime, I reviewed the footage from my hidden doorbell camera. There it was, in high definition. Darla Penrose, clearly identifiable, dragging a ladder from her garage and methodically destroying and stealing each camera. I secured multiple copies of this footage immediately. One to the cloud, one to a flash drive in my safe deposit box, and one to my lawyer, Patricia Lawson, whom I hired the next morning. Patricia, a specialist in HOA disputes, was practically giddy when she saw the video. She called it the clearest case of criminal destruction she'd seen in 20 years. The detective assigned to the case called 2 days later. After viewing the footage, he asked if I wished to press charges. I confirmed that I did. The value of the cameras alone exceeded $2,000, making the act a felony in our state, not including the additional charges for trespassing and vandalism. The total damages approached $4,000. Meanwhile, Darla, seemingly oblivious, continued to send me fine notices. She even sent a note congratulating me on finally complying with the rules by removing the cameras, a written admission, as Patricia noted, that she knew they were gone. We filed a civil suit against Darla personally and the HOA for harassment and improper fines. Patricia's research also revealed Darla's history of being removed from 2 previous HOA boards for overstepping her authority, a pattern of behavior that would be very useful in court. The monthly HOA meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. The room was packed. Darla opened the meeting with her usual condescending smile, feigning ignorance of the legal papers she had been served. When she got to new business, I raised my hand. She tried to ignore me, but Patricia stood up and demanded to address the board regarding criminal actions taken by their president. The room went silent. Darla's smile finally vanished. Patricia stated that when an HOA president commits felonies against homeowners, it is everyone's business. She then connected her laptop to the projector. That is when I played the footage. The entire room watched in stunned silence. You could hear gasps when Darla's face appeared clearly in the infrared light. The board's vice president immediately called for an emergency vote to remove Darla, which passed unanimously. But the best part was yet to come. As the room was still reacting, 2 police officers entered. They had been waiting outside. They walked directly to Darla and informed her she was under arrest for felony destruction of property, criminal trespassing, and theft. The look on her face as they read her Miranda rights in front of the very people she had ruled over was priceless. The prosecutor later told me that Darla was facing up to 4 years in prison for the felony charge alone. Her husband's attempts to call in favors were useless against clear video evidence. The HOA's insurance refused to cover her legal defense as she was acting outside her authority. Her face went white when the judge denied her request for dismissal and set a trial date, finally realizing her HOA presidency was the least of her problems now.